Best to keep your emotions at bay as much as you can. This is already an emotional situation, especially if you have children involved. But most When most people think of divorce, they think the absolute worst. Dramatic courtroom scenes, fighting with the family, aggressive, expensive lawyers, and months of litigation and battles. Well, today, I'm going to talk about a question that I get asked very often, more often than I'd like to know. Do you have to go to court to get a divorce? In this episode, we're going to be covering that question and also mentioning alternative means to be able to get you through that phase of your life if it only comes to that. Hello and welcome in. My name is Kat. I am the founder of Thrive with Grace. I'm your safe space coach, and I am so happy and delighted to have you here today. If you're new to my channel, make sure to like and subscribe for more episodes similar to this one. We cover all real life situations. So if you have a question or you need to talk to someone in a safe space, please make sure to send me a DM. I am always available to you. So spoiler alert, I'm going to tell you the question. Yes, in several situations and several cases, you can avoid court if you're looking to get a divorce. I actually recommend this the most. I recommend trying to work things out outside of the courtroom because it helps the relationship between you and your ex, especially if you have kids. You do not want them to have to go through that situation where you may have to put them on the stand and they have to talk to strangers. They're feeling guilty because they don't know whose side to pick. It's just a lot of mess. So I definitely say, let's work to mediate this situation. If we cannot resolve it and rectify it, let's do things as amicably as possible and do it outside of the courtroom. Now, you may ask, how do I get a divorce and not go and stand before a judge? The answer is very simple. We're going to go through the steps during this video, but the quick and short answer is an uncontested divorce. That is where you and your spouse have little to no arguments. You're mediating, everything is going well, and you're coming to the same conclusions. You're resolving your issues and not making them bigger and larger than they need to be, removing the emotion out of it and coming to an agreement. Now, notice what I'm saying. The key word is agreement. You're not arguing about spousal support. You're not arguing about children visitation, who gets the house, who gets the car, who gets the dog, who gets the cat, etc. We are not arguing. We're coming to solid agreements and understandings between you and your ex. That is what the uncontested divorce means. Now, we're going to go through about 4 options, which helps you walk through those situations and those cases when you're willing to go through with a divorce without having to go through with the trial. Here's option number 1. It is exactly what I said, the uncontested divorce, where you and your spouse actually make an agreement, come to a conclusion, you file the paperwork, and you actually send that forth before a judge, maybe with an attorney involved, but you don't necessarily need to have an attorney. But you send that before the judge, and there's no trial involved, and the judge signs off on it. That is an uncontested divorce. Quickie. Now, I can't say that it's going to happen in 2 weeks or 2 months or 2 years. What I will say is the more diligent you and your ex are, the easier and simpler and quicker and the sooner it's going to be where you two are divorced, no issues, no problems, nothing like that. Here's another option. Instead of going into the courtroom, you could go through mediation. Sometimes, and I know you've seen this on television, where you and your ex, you actually have a third party involved and they help you to work out the disagreements or the agreements, write it out and come to an agreement, and you file it still with the court. It still all has to be filed with the court, but you do not have to go through the courthouse because you went through mediation. The cost for this can vary. I've seen cases as low as $5,000, cases as low high as $10,000, but it depends on the company that you choose to hire. I do not have recommendations, and for the record, I am not an attorney. This is just a matter of opinion, and because I've gone through a divorce myself, so I'm giving you basically my thoughts on this. Now, option number 3 coincides with option number 2, which is mediation. But option number 3 is called a collaborative divorce, where you have an attorney and your ex has an attorney. You two sit across from one another normally, and you go ahead and work this out together, one at a time, going through each item, but with an attorney present. With the mediation, you do not necessarily have to have an attorney present. You can, but normally it's a third-party company that helps you work through that. And the fourth option is very simple. You can actually file online, especially if there are no children involved. Maybe you were not married for over a year. You do not have to go through the nitty-gritty. You can actually file online. Now, listen to me when I tell you, although these are options that keep you outside of the courthouse, you still have to get the paperwork legally filed. So you do not have to be present, but you do still have to get it legally filed. I do want to make that at a point. If you do not get it legally filed and it is not documented, then you are not really truly divorced. You're actually just separated and it's just put on paper. So until it's made legal, it's not real. Now, you may ask, what are the benefits of avoiding going to court? I think those are no-brainer in common sense. The biggest one is the emotional toll that it will take if you do have to go to court between you and your ex. I always believe that it's best to keep your emotions at bay as much as you can. This is already an emotional situation, especially if you have children involved, but most importantly, you personally. So I would recommend definitely to try to keep it out of the courthouse as much as possible. So you've got emotion, you've got finances, and you've got time. It's going to be expensive because you do have to pay for the court appearance, you have to pay for the retainer for your attorney. All the expenses come out to play. And the most important thing for me is time. You do have to wait to be put on the docket before you even seen before the judge. And then at that point, if you do not have an agreement between you and your ex, you are going to be battling it out, which is just going to add to more time and less money in your pocket. And I believe that it should be mutually agreed upon between you and your ex as much as possible to avoid that at all costs. Now, there are certain situations where, and circumstances where you just do have to go to court. If there's domestic violence, abuse, alcoholism, those types of things, custody battles, difference in who gets what asset and who takes on what liability, then you can't avoid, going to court. What I'm doing is basically advocating for you to try to come to a mutual agreement. Even if you have to speak to a life coach such as myself to mediate the situation between the two of you, that's understandable. Now, there are certain situations where you can't avoid not going to court. If you have domestic violence, alcoholism, abuse, all of those situations, all of those terrible things do take place in some relationships, some marriages. So in that case, I do recommend highly, of course, that you go to court and have a judge intervene between the two of you, because I don't see you really coming to a mutual understanding at that point. There could also be custody battles, visitation arguments and disagreements, spousal support. There are so many things. Who's taking on liabilities, who's taking on assets, etc. So there are situations where you just cannot avoid going to court, and I understand that. What I am saying is, if you can work it out, I'm not saying, oh my gosh, stay together, because I understand I'm a divorcee myself. Sometimes things just do not work out, and sometimes people just grow apart and different situations happen. Infidelity, I understand, trust me. But what I'm saying is there's no reason other than the reasons I stated, and everybody's situation is different, but there's no reason for you two not to come to some sort of understanding and hopefully still try to remain friends or have mutual respect for one another when going through that divorce. If anything, do it for your children and do it for the family, because everyone is going to be affected, not just you and not just your ex. I want to remind you to show each other grace. The situation is horrible already because you have to get a divorce. You opted to get a divorce. But please show one another grace. Communicate as effectively and as openly as you can. If you're in a space where you cannot communicate, get a mediator, get a third party involved so that you can communicate efficiently between one another. That is my biggest and best advice for you. I also recommend, if it can be avoided, I will never advocate for divorce. If it can be worked out, try marriage counseling, try speaking to a therapist, try speaking to a relationship coach, do all things that you can, because I just hate the fact that families are torn apart because they can't come to an understanding. So I hope that this episode was informative and gave you the information that you needed. I don't enjoy speaking about, things of this nature because we try to show grace in all aspects, but this is a question that I get asked very often. So the answer is yes. There are other alternatives for you to get a divorce rather than having to set foot into the courtroom. It just takes work between both parties. Both parties have to be willing. If you're married with children, keep your children's needs at the forefront and put yours to the back burner. No need for egos to be intertwined in this situation. You have a mutual understanding. You want to get a divorce. Do it collectively, try to show one another respect, and try to remember the good times even though that time has passed. So I hope that you enjoyed it. If you did, please be sure to leave a like, share it with someone that needs this information, and I will see you in the next episode. Thank you so much. Bye.